Hey guys, today I want to cover 3 terms that I think everybody who's working with sound should be familiar with. Now these are a little bit more technical, but I think by understanding what they are and how they work, what they do, you're going to be able to make creative decisions that much better and understand a lot more about your sound. So let's get into this. Real quick, if you like these videos, you want to support my channel, head over to alexknickerbocker.com. I've got a PayPal donation link as well as a bunch of sound effects that I'm curating from my personal library so that you can use. I've got transitions, I've got vehicles, I've got ambiances, everything you could need to design whatever scene you might be working on. So I'll be adding more as I can. Don't forget to check back. All right, the first term is multiple mono versus interleaved. Now this isn't to be confused with mono versus stereo. That's a totally different thing. The easiest way to talk about this is probably to just show you. I've got a file from my sound effects library pulled up. It's a stereo file and it's interleaved. It's got a left and a right channel, as you can see on the waveform. But if you look at the actual file in my Finder, you can see it's just a single file, even though it's got 2 channels, again, left and right. Interleaved bundles all of your channels into a single file, so all you have to deal with is that one file, and you can pass it around however you'd like. Multiple mono breaks those channels out into their own individual files. So looking at this same exact file again, multiple mono, I've got a discrete left channel file and a discrete right channel file. So it's a little bit more confusing to look at, but it means effectively the same thing. You've still got the left and right channels. Now where this gets really interesting is when you get into multiple channel files that are 3, 4, 6, 10 channels rather than just 1 or 2. The benefit of interleaved files is that it's much more clean to look at when you're working with them. You've just got that one file and everything's encapsulated. However, depending on the file type you're working with and the program you're working with, some of those channels might not actually map to the right places when you bring them in. For example, if you've got a left, center, and right channel, you might think everything's fine, but when you pull it into a piece of software, the left channel is going to map fine, but the center channel might map to the right, and the right channel might map to the center, and then it's going to be really bad and confusing and obviously not sound right. This becomes especially important when you're working with surround files, especially final mixes. If you do this wrong, you don't have everything mapped correctly, you might have a center channel that's supposed to be all your dialogue and the stuff that really glues your audience to the screen coming out from, the right surround or something, and everybody's going to be going, what's wrong with this? Why is this happening? So for me, it makes a lot more sense to work with multiple mono files a lot of times instead of interleaved files, because especially if I'm delivering a final mix to a picture editor who's going to marry everything back together, and then, you get an actual video to watch and listen to, they should have a left channel that they know is left, a center channel they know is center, a right channel that they know is right, all the surrounds map properly, the low frequency channel, the subwoofer channel maps properly, and there's no mismatch or weirdness, so something again doesn't come out the right speaker. And one last thing to note on that, I've run into a bunch of issues where delivering broadcast wave files versus say AIF files, I've tried to deliver them interleaved, and broadcast wave files sometimes get their channel orders mixed up weirdly, whereas AIF files seem to retain the channel order that I want more often. So again, just using that multiple mono format and delivering individual split out files for each channel of audio seems to be a lot more foolproof. So anything I can do to take the guesswork out of my work and the work that I'm passing on to other people, I'm gonna do. I think multiple mono makes a lot more sense to use than interleaved files. All right, the next term is decibels. Now everybody's kind of familiar with what decibels are. They're abbreviated in dB, and they're kind of like how loud something is, but by understanding it in a little bit more detail, you can do a lot more with your audio, like read meters properly and know when you're mixing to a certain level and what needs to be dialed back or brought forward, even understand when you're going to clip your inputs, stuff that's basic but really is foundational to sound. Now again, decibel is just the measure of sonic energy that a sound has. You'll see things like dBA or dBV or dBu. That's more in the electronics world, the electrical engineering side of things. For sound purposes, I think dBSPL and dBFS are the most important measurements to be familiar with. dBSPL, or sound pressure level, is just a measure of how much energy a sound has while it's traveling through the air. As I'm talking at a certain level, and that can be measured in decibels. There's some really cool charts floating around about how dBSPL works, and it shows you, when the human eardrum bursts because something is too loud, or, how loud a jet fighter is when you're standing 5 feet away from it. dB full scale, on the other hand, is totally in the electronic world, the digital digital domain, and it's basically a representation of how loud something is within your software. And you'll see it in every DAW, every nonlinear editor. All of these programs measure things in dBFS. And you can kind of decouple these measurements from each other. dBSPL really only applies to things in the real world. dBFS only applies to things in the digital domain. It's a microphone or a speaker that's going to translate those sounds between each other. So just because something is 100 dB out in the real world, you set your recording level to, whatever you want, and that sound might be minus 60 dBFS or minus 20 dBFS. By setting your levels, you're choosing the relationship between those terms. Just like when you're setting your listening level, you're choosing the relationship between what you see on a meter versus how loud something is in real life. But especially when it comes to dBFS, I think the most important thing to know is when you're clipping and when it's actually bad. Pretty much every single piece of software out there now has this internal mixing engine that it uses, and it'll process audio even if that audio is clipping. But the master output of pretty much every software is handled a little bit differently because that's your, real world output. If you clip the master bus, that's when your audio really is clipping. You'll get distortion, you'll get all kinds of bad stuff and digital white noise. It's really not good. So how is this helpful in a workflow? Well, by understanding how loud something is in the real world, you can then capture it more effectively and set your levels in a more appropriate way on the record side of things. And having some kind of standard of loudness where you can say, oh, I'm working at minus 24 dB on my meters, that's minus 24 dB full scale. I can set my output levels based on that number, and that allows me to understand when something is going to be too loud, when something is going to be too quiet, when I need to boost up my dialogue levels or dial my effects back or anything like that. It allows you to set all these standards based on loudness that then you can have the discussion. How loud is this? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Do I need to turn something up or turn something down? That's kind of the foundation of everything when it comes to mixing. So really important to understand. And the final term I want to talk about is a print master versus stems. Now, everybody who has ever delivered any kind of audio has delivered a print master, whether they know it or not. A print master is the final deliverable of whatever mix you've done, whether it's mono or stereo or 7.1 or Atmos or anything like that. It's all encapsulated in that last file. That's your print master. That is everything in your soundtrack. Now, stems are generated in more professional workflows, and they each contain isolated versions of parts of your soundtrack. So you have a dialogue stem, for example. You have a music stem, for example. You have an effects stem. You have a Foley stem, a background stem, etc., etc. And they can get more granular depending on how complicated something is. If you've got specifically cars, you can have just a car effects stem and a specifically gun effects stem, or you can have everything married together in one. What it allows you to do is break apart everything. So if you have, say, foreign language versions of something, you can say, give me the effects stem, give me the music stem. I don't need the dialogue stem. It's all going to be redubbed. And now we can have all of the mix decisions that got made for the original. And all you have to do is change out the dialogue. Now, obviously, in most independent workflows, it's really not going to be necessary because all you want is that one final print master. But for anything that's going to an international market or to multiple different languages or even certain deliverable specs that major companies like Netflix or Amazon ask for, you'll have to have stems and a print master separated out from each other. So knowing how those work, knowing how to route everything properly so that you can get exactly the representation of your dialogue mix in both your print master and your stem is hugely important. And understanding how all this works as a foundation is going to allow you to get there. So hopefully that helps you understand some of these terms, pulls back the curtain on them a little bit, and shows you how they might fit into your workflow and why you need to know them. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, come follow me over on Instagram at AXK, and as always, thanks for watching.